Okay, so um, I'm still playing with the look of the video and the sound quality and that kind of thing, and the format of the show. I'm going to continue the series on the Book of Acts that I started yesterday, and the second chapter of Acts will be in a video that I'll shoot later tonight, probably after my kids go to bed. But I wanted to just take 5 minutes to throw out a thought at you. The story of the cleansing of the temple appears in all four Gospels, and with Matthew, Mark, and Luke, what they call the Synoptic Gospels, it appears closer to the end of those books. And in John, it appears much closer to the start of John's Gospel. And that has led some people to speculate on that it may have happened twice, that he may have kicked the money changers and the people selling things out of the temple twice. I don't know whether he did or not. I want to read you, though, the version that shows up in John chapter 2, starting with verse 13. And going through chapter 17, or verse 17, sorry. So starting with verse 13 in chapter 2. And the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those that were selling oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers seated. And he made a scourge of cords, and drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the coins. He poured out the coins of the money changers, and overturned their tables. And to those who were selling the doves he said, "Take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for thy house will consume me." A couple of things that I want to point out here. First of all, and in case you're wondering, I'm reading from the NASB. Everybody wants to talk these days about how Jesus is love, Jesus is love, Jesus is love, to the point where, well, they flat out make it seem like he's tolerant of anything, that he will let you get away with anything. And this is obviously not true here. Jesus did not let these people get away with turning the temple into a place to get rich. And it wasn't that he got mad, he got angry and just freaked out. It says he sat down and made a scourge out of cords. A scourge is basically a braided whip. Sometimes a scourge would have bits of metal and bone woven into it. Doesn't look like it from this passage, it just looks like he just braided it. And a scourge is what they actually used when they beat him before his crucifixion. Some of the apostles in the book of Acts were scourged. So this was not an off-the-cuff, oh, I'm mad type action. He knew what he was doing. He sat down, he thought about it, he braided this whip, and then he got up and started swinging it and overturning tables. It was that important to him, and that's not typical behavior for Jesus. But it does show you a couple of things. First of all, that not everything is acceptable to him. Not everything is okay, and he's not tolerant of everything. There are things that will cause him to reject you. The other thing that I want to point out is what he says in verse 16. Take these things away and stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise. And I gotta question a lot of modern day preachers, especially those that have mega churches and who have gotten rich by being a pastor or preacher or teacher or whatever it is they call themselves. The really big one here in Texas, there's a church down in Houston, and the guy has millions and millions of dollars, and you know, when people challenge him on this, and they say that, you know, you're getting rich selling the gospel, and his response has been, no, I don't take a salary from the church. Well, how did you get your money? Well, it comes from his book royalties and that sort of thing. And okay, fine. But who's buying those books? People who think they are seeking God. And I'm not even going to get into whether or not the books are scripturally accurate and are actually helping people seek God. I don't think they are, honestly. But putting that aside, if Jesus said, take these things away, stop making my Father's house a house of merchandise, if you're getting rich by selling books that supposedly help people to get closer to God, and they were getting rich by selling animals so that people could get closer to God, it's the same thing, okay? You're not doing any different. And I'm telling you right now, if Jesus walked into some of these mega churches today, he would sit down and braid a whip. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's wrong to write a book that helps people get closer to God. And I don't think that it's wrong to publish that book. And I don't even think that it's wrong for that book necessarily to be sold, particularly if you're a guy like Francis Chan, who donates all of the money, the royalties that his books make, to doing things like feeding the homeless and funding churches in third world countries and that sort of thing. He's not getting rich. In fact, he sold everything that he had and took his family and lived for several months in third world countries. And my understanding is, the latest I heard, he was living in a trailer park, okay? So he's not getting rich like some of these other megachurch pastors are. And I don't care whether it's the salary that you're getting from the church or from the books and coffee mugs with scriptures on them that you're selling. If you're getting rich off of people who are pursuing God by selling them merchandise or preaching a gospel to them that is not what Jesus was teaching and is not demanding more of a sacrifice, where you're just tickling their ears, Jesus would walk into your church and sit down and start braiding a whip. So if you're one of those pastors, think about what Jesus did. If you go to a church that one of those pastors leads, think about what Jesus did. And if you're thinking about buying a book from one of those pastors who has got $45 million, don't. You can pursue Jesus without making a false teacher rich. Don't be part of the reason that Jesus would want to sit down and braid a whip. Don't be part of the reason that he would want to flip the tables over. I'll be back a little bit later tonight to continue with the second chapter of Acts in the Bible study series that I started yesterday. Until then, I'll see